I'm glad the people that are here are all here. You guys are great supporters of us and have been for years. And I wanted to, get us all together to show this film all in one place. I think these issues that are shown in Paul McKeever's film are very important in regards to aspects of personal liberty, individual freedoms, property rights, a lot of things that aren't discussed in our movement and or in the general public. So I'll hand this over to Paul in a second and let you guys know that this is Paul McKeever. He's the president of the Freedom Party of Canada. And I'll let him tell you everything he needs to, and he's the director of this film, so give him a round of applause.
As Chris was just saying, I'm leader of the Freedom Party of Ontario, Freedom Party. And about a year and a half ago, just over a year and a half ago, I started going through all of the archives of the party, and I thought, it'd be really nice to have a collection of the video clips, the audio clips, all the things we've published over the years since 1984. And so I started writing through all that stuff and putting it together in a sort of logical way. But there was one thing that could not be ignored. And it could not be ignored more and more and more the more I got into the history of the Freedom Party of Ontario. And that was the immense presence and importance of Marc Emery to the history of not only the Freedom Party of Ontario, but to the history of politics in Ontario and now in Canada. I had access to documents that I never knew existed, that most people I knew, even who worked in the office, didn't know existed, including, for example, a summons issued to one Marc Emery for opening his store on a Sunday. In real I had access to notes that he had made in preparation to go to court. And I thought, this is more serious than I thought. This isn't just a little in-house production for Freedom Party. Given what's happening to Marc Emery right now, there's actually, I felt it was a moral obligation. Because too often we see in the newspapers or in the blogs or in the comments of the blogs that, oh, Marc Emery, he's just a drug dealer. Marc Emery, he was just in it for the money. Marc Emery doesn't care about anybody but himself. And all of those things were worse than lies. They were assaults not only on him, they were assaults on everybody in this room. Because they were a misrepresentation of everything he had been doing since he started getting political in the late 1970s. And so I thought, what can I do here? One thing I can do is I can show with this movie that Marc wasn't always the Prince of Pop. In fact, he was the Prince of Principle. And that guided his actions from 1979, as far back as I really followed it, right through until he left Canada in 1992. And that entire time, I don't want to ruin the punchline, we learned something about that at the beginning of part 2. But that entire time, he was guided by this principle that individual adults have a right to think for themselves, to make choices for themselves, and that the role of government is to make sure that nobody interferes with that freedom of choice. And I thought, if I just show Marc Emery in all of the various campaigns that he ran and masterminded and got so much press in which he wasn't talking about marijuana, nobody will be able to say from that point forward that he's just about marijuana, that he's just a drug dealer, that he's in it for the money, because they'll learn that he was in it to spend almost every cent he had, that most of the time he wasn't talking about marijuana at all, at least in the early years. And that this is a man driven not by profit, but by principle. One of the things about part 2, because I don't want to ruin too much of it. Part 1, you will not see marijuana mentioned except for one time, and it won't come out of Marc Emery's mouth. And I want to see if you can capture when that happens, because it's going to be revisited in the second part, and I think you'll get a good laugh at it. Part 2 is a different thing altogether, because as I started to learn, and I didn't know much about Marc's history after he left Canada, after he left the Freedom Party, after he moved out west. And as I watched what he had done, I realized that Marc is like a scientist. a political scientist. He tries this approach, and he says, here's what's wrong, this doesn't work. And he tries it again a different way. He says, that doesn't work, let's try this. And above all, what you will find by the time you're finished watching this is a person who said, I know what society is now, I know what works, and the fact that we're all sitting in this hall right now is evidence that he is right. You know, hopefully a lot of you people I know, like me, are here because we want to show Marc that we're thinking of him. But Marc doesn't just want to be thought of. When he was in Saskatoon Correctional in 2004, his magazine, Cannabis Culture, ran this full-page poster. It looked like this. And if you can read it, it says, "Let my incarceration galvanize you into action." That's what he wants. That's why he's sitting right now in solitary confinement in Seattle. Because he thinks that, and I think he's correct, people now care about the cause that he's been championing. They care about his fate, and they realize that what happens to Marc Emery ultimately can happen to any one of us. So, just before he was extradited, Marc and I had been talking, and Chris Goodwin, who arranged this event today, had been talking. And I think maybe partly nostalgia, but also because of the fact that political parties get voices that other people don't get. He said, why not register Freedom Party, which is just an Ontario party, federally? Because when you run federally, you get 2% of the vote. There's only a few hundred thousand votes in some odd right. That's about 180,000 to 200 and some odd thousand per percentage point. And that's if you get 2%. In other words, you get about 420,000 if you got 2% of the vote. And imagine how much more of a voice you would have, now that they've shut down the seed business, if the taxpayer was forced to finance the anti-prohibition movement. The Green Party's doing it. Jodi Emery is proud, and she loves talking about what she's doing with her campaign, and I think it's amazing. And Freedom Party's more of a sort of a right-wing, low-tax party. We're going to be drilling at it from the other end of things. So we set up a table out front. It costs you nothing. And if you could, it's something you could do for Marc to let him know we are taking action. And to know that you're taking action for your own rights and your own freedoms. Just sign a declaration of membership for Freedom Party of Canada. We get at least 250 of them in, they're stuck with us. We're registered. So please do that. And everybody who signs one of those today, please sign one of this. Sign this. Because this is going to go home to Jodi with all of the signatures of everybody who said, yeah, Marc, I'm going to take action.
So I'd like to hand it off to Jodi. She'd like to say a couple words. The second half now is all about Marc Emery, the cannabis activist Marc Emery, the principal of pot, the Prince of Pot, and his extradition, unfortunately. So Jodi Emery.
All right, well, thank you all for coming out. And to McKeever, the director who worked on this in his very little spare time, being a professional lawyer and family man. He's a busy guy, but he worked on this, and it's amazing. I was really moved the first time I watched it, and again, seeing it now. And it's great to see my hero husband, Marc, and the reason why he is a hero. And he's in solitary. It's been a while. So it's very tough, but I know there are so many people who love him and are moved by him and moved to action because of him, and who will say that he helped save their lives or change their lives, and they in turn help so many others. And that's what Marc wants, is for his example to create not just a bunch of followers, but a bunch of leaders in their own right. So that's why I'm doing what I can with politics and running with the Green Party federally and provincially, and now I'm a director at large and the policing and crime critic provincially, and I've got my hands full with that in the store and trying to end prohibition, trying to limit government and all the other battles that go on. And Marc, he hasn't heard from us in over a week, and I haven't heard hope he knows that, you know, he knows we're here today, but I don't know how he's doing, but he knows that as long as people keep being active, that's all that matters, because he'll be out of jail Sunday. It may be 5 years, it may be hopefully a lot less, but when he comes home, we can have an army ready and willing and prepared to take down prohibition and free all the drug war prisoners.
Free Marc Emery.
Marc Emery is the cannabis princess part of his life, which is what most people know him for. So here's the rest.